Today, we have Susan Scott as our guest. When you think of fierce conversations, don't think criticism. Think passion, integrity, authenticity, collaboration. Think leadership. Think conversations that build our world of meaning. Conversations during which, on a human level, we connect. Speak in a human voice, our own voice. Conversations during which we touch one another in some way. After decades of working with CEO globally, Susan Scott believes if you want to become a great leader, you must gain capacity and the courage to connect with people who are important to you at a deep level or lower your aim. Susan found Fierce after 13 years of leading think tanks. She has shared her expertise in keynotes, TED Talks, and award-winning book, Fierce Conversations, achieving success at the work life, one conversation at a time, and Fierce Leadership, an alternative to the worst best practices of business, and today, Fierce Love, creating a love that lasts, one conversation at a time. So welcome, Susan. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, Tara. I'm delighted to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, I have to say, I love your books. And I will say, I recommend, there's probably two books that I read and reread, and yours is one of them, Fierce Conversations. That has impacted me on a business level, with my kids, and on a personal level. And it's meant so much. And then Fierce Love, oh, I was so excited to share this with our audience. So let's get after it.
All right.
So first of all, what in your life, because you've been doing Fierce Conversations, working with business, CEO, think tanks, what led you to transition a little bit and do a book just focusing on fierce love?
Oh, well, every December, as we're approaching the end of the year, I ask myself, is there something that when I get to the end of my life, or as a friend describes it, when my will matures, looking back, will there be anything that I didn't do that I will regret? And it kept coming up for me. You need to write Fierce Love. You really do. And I kept putting it off. And then I was with a client in Austin, Texas, and staying at their house, and got up very early, got into their swimming pool. I'm in the pool. It's beautiful. It's quiet, birds. And I asked myself, so what's the next most important thing? And again, it was write Fierce Love. And I remember sort of sinking beneath the water, blowing bubbles and saying, no. But just because I thought I was just done with the whole fierce thing. But I realized that, no, this is important because, business people all over the world know about Fierce Conversations, and we train some of the largest global companies out there. But if you don't work for one of those companies, you probably have never heard of Fierce Conversations. And so I wanted to reach everyone. And I do get emails from all over, from people who read Fierce Conversations, and they say, and I use this at home, and this is so wonderful. And I thought, well, I just want more people to know about it.
Oh, hugely impactful. And you start off by saying that the goal is to come out and be real and authentic and connect at a deeper level. Can you tell us more about that? Because it takes skill and courage. And that's something that my audience, and me in particularly, because I speak to people like a little bit, a little bit back on the journey of overly kind to empowered kind, that is a challenge. Tell us more about how to be real and authentic and connect at a deeper level, and how to develop skills and courage.
Well, let me back up, Tara, if you don't mind. I want to put out some foundational ideas that everything else builds on. And I was attending a conference where a poet from Yorkshire, England, was speaking. His name is David White. And he said, the young man who's newly married is often really puzzled, even frustrated, that this lovely person with whom he hopes to spend the rest of his life insists on appearing before his face on a regular basis, wanting to talk yet again about the same thing they talked about last weekend. And he wonders, why are we having this conversation again? And he said, long about age 42, and he was 42 and married at the time, and he smiled. He said, if he's been paying attention, it dawns on him this ongoing, robust conversation that I have been having with my wife is not about the relationship. The conversation is the relationship.
Mm.
And I was so struck by that, Tara. I had just left a long-term marriage, and it was hard. It was painful. I was very sad about it, and still I was confused. What, why? That answered the question. My husband and I had not been able or willing or courageous enough to have the conversations that would have been absolutely essential. And if we'd known how to have them, we'd probably still be together. So that was huge. And if we add yet another topic to the list of things that we just don't want to talk about because it could wreck another weekend, then all of the possibilities for our relationship become smaller and smaller and smaller until one day I realized I am making myself quite small. I am behaving as if I am just the space around my shoes. And that is just tragic. That is so tragic. And the Papua New Guineans have a wonderful word, mokita, different from a mojito, which is a wonderful drink.
Yeah, mokita.
Mokita. And it translates to that which everyone knows and no one speaks of. And I think that there are so many issues that we don't speak of, and we almost strike agreements. They're unsaid, but they're there. I'm not going to talk about your drinking if you won't bring up my weight gain. Let's not talk about. Or we've tried to talk about it, and one or both of us get very angry, very upset, leaves the room, and it's like, well, why would I try that again? That was horrible. And so we don't talk about it. Meanwhile, we're headed towards a bad day. We're getting deeper and deeper and deeper in trouble. And the other idea I wanted to bring out was I had been working with these CEO think tanks for years and years and years, and I happened to be reading Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, in which a character is at a bar with a bunch of people that he knows, and they're all drinking and laughing. And then somebody says, so how did you go bankrupt? And he says, gradually and then suddenly. I remember laughing. And then I had this epiphany that our careers, our companies, our relationships, and our lives succeed or flatline or fail gradually, then suddenly, one conversation at a time. And I knew that was correct because, all these tens of thousands of hours of conversations that I'd had with these fascinating people, all the good stuff, the stuff that they could celebrate. How did you get there? Well, we got there one successful conversation, one successful meeting at a time. What about the stuff you hated? One miserable conversation or missing conversation. And I honestly think it's the missing conversations that are the most expensive. And I'll never forget being in a one-to-one with one of the CEOs, and he was so upset because his wife had just filed for divorce. And he said, I didn't see it coming, and I am not prepared to lose an 18-year marriage, but I think I'm losing it. And and I asked him, how did you lose it? And he said, we didn't talk. We didn't talk about the things we needed to talk about. It was very quiet in our home.
Yes.
Meanwhile, my wife is more and more and more unhappy because of these unresolved issues and these forbidden topics. And I haven't been all that happy myself. I mean, I love my wife. I want to stay married, but we're at a very shallow place in our relationship. There's not a lot of excitement. There's not a lot of passion. We don't really share at a deep level with one another anymore. So I get it, and I'm going to do my best to try to retrieve that marriage. So I mean, that happens. That's so human. And that happens
Yes.
to so many people. It happened to me. And I mean, it's going around big time. And so I think for people to understand that my relationship is going to succeed or flatline or fail one conversation at a time, and that the conversation is the relationship, and that we all wake up when we arrive at a suddenly, but our 99% of our lives are lived during gradually. And we need to notice during the gradually, how are things? How are we doing really? And stay
Yes.
current with one another. So those ideas,
That's huge.
yeah, well, they are huge, and you know, and this is what we teach in companies as well, and they get it, they totally get it, because you know, whatever your job is, there are people around you who are important to your success, to your happiness, and your career. And you know, what is the quality of those relationships? What is the quality and the output of the conversations, the meetings that you attend? Oh my Lord, meetings. Most of them are a complete waste of time. They're so boring. Half the time people arrive at a meeting and I don't even know what we're here for, you know, and nothing interesting happens, nothing new emerges. And you think of that to-do list that would fell an ox that's on your desk, and you really would like to get to that stuff rather than attend one of these other useless, boring meetings. So this is everything that we teach applies everywhere in our lives. Our lives are about relationships. Without relationships at work, at home, we got nothing. So how do we nurture those relationships? And that's what Fierce is all about. And it does take courage, but courage comes with a skill.
Yes.
And that is what we teach. Once you know how to have a conversation on a difficult, a sensitive issue, and you do it, and nobody died, you gain confidence. It's like, wow, that actually worked. I don't know how many times I've had people say, I went home and I did have this conversation with my partner, and it was one of the best conversations we've ever had. And I had been afraid. We needed to have that conversation 10 years ago. And so we finally had it, and thank God. So it's a big deal, our conversations, and we're just not aware. We're just not aware. It's not our fault. Nobody told us, but I'm telling you now.
Yeah. You've told us.
Pay attention.
Yeah. I'm offering some free pages of the Unravel Notebook to help support you along the journey and to correlate with this week's episode. So look for the link and enjoy. That's huge, because I have some friends that are almost arriving at the suddenly, but what you're speaking to, Susan, is when you're like acknowledging and you realize, oh my goodness, this isn't working. We aren't having those conversations. I've pulled back myself, and then I'm seeing them getting close to the suddenly. One couple is having those conversations, and it's beautiful. And this also pertains to my husband and I, because we definitely had a relationship flop recently where, you know, I went through something tragic. My niece passed away, and I thought we were dancing together. But when I had my little flop, I realized, oh my goodness, he's like 3 feet away from me. And we both had a belief system, which you really address belief system. And our belief system is that it was dangerous to disclose what we really think and feel. And that that's not, you know, and that was a false belief system that was hurting us. So you talk about that, and that's so important.
What's dangerous is not disclosing what we're really thinking and feeling.
And that was on me. So I was disclosing this, but I knew, like what you talk about with the mineral rights, the deep stuff. I was very aware of the deep stuff. It was appearing in my journal, and I was not addressing it. And so thankfully we've had great conversations and we're on the same page.
So
but
yeah, that really makes me happy whenever I hear that someone's just had a really great, useful conversation that brought them closer to the person who matters in their lives.
And I believe that's like what you said. that's what it does if it's done right, and you give the tools to do it, which is huge. Because I think a lot of people think like, oh, fierce conversation is me coming at them. That is not what you say, and that's not how you go about it. So talk a little bit more about how you structure a fierce conversation and how you do that.
There are different conversations depending on the situation, and that's why I hope everybody will check out Fierce Love and Fierce
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
It's not just we have every single conversation exactly like this,
Right.
They're different.
Yes.
But here's the thing, they're not complicated. Once you see, and you can speak to this, Tara, because you've done it yourself. Once you say, oh, that's a way to do this, and you go and do it, you don't have to refer back to your notes. You don't have to say, oh, wait, how did that go? And is this person green, yellow, red, or, black? And is this person, on this kind of a personality report? How do I? No, that is just that's a waste of time. I don't have time in my life to think about how do I talk to this person differently than how I would talk to everybody else. That's ridiculous. Nobody has time to do that. And I'm not a shrink. I don't want to try to figure that out. So there are simple ways that you can talk to anybody about anything depending on the situation. So it might be you just want to sit down and get close to your spouse or your partner. Or maybe at the end of the day you're together and your partner has just gone through something really tough. And how do you help your partner sort of process that? How do you, and in that conversation, the two of you will get so much closer. Because honestly, I'm not the one who has said this. People have said this throughout the centuries, that a basic desire is not just to be loved, it's to be known. It's to be known. And when you have, when your partner says, oh my Lord, you won't believe what happened today, you can drop into that mineral rights model that you referred to. And it's wonderful because you're only asking questions. Tell me about it. And I don't want to try to walk everybody all the way through that model right now, because that would take a little while, but it's all questions. And I think where we get into a lot of trouble at work and at home is that as soon as somebody says, I got a problem, or this happened and I'm struggling, we think that our job is to come up with some suggestions for them. Well, have you thought about doing this? And what about this? And gosh, something like that happened to me, and here's what I did, and here's what that is not useful, really. And people are not necessarily going to take your advice. It's when we come to our own realization, when somebody asks us enough questions that we arrive at our own, oh, that's what this is about. And so often where you start with, this is my issue, is not at all where you end up, because I thought that was my issue, but actually that is a symptom of something else, a bigger issue. And when you help somebody get to that, and you help them process their emotions around it, which is so important. I grew up, I'm old. I grew up at a time where, you don't show emotion, you don't talk about emotion in the workplace. Well, that's ridiculous. You'd have to lop off half of yourself when you come in the door, because we are emotional people. And years ago, a guy named Daniel Kahneman, Princeton psychologist, actually won the Nobel Prize for economics for his discovery, after study after study after study after study, discovered that we human beings, that'd be you and me, we make decisions and act on those decisions first for emotional reasons. Second, for rational. We sure hope that there's some rational stuff that will back up what we're feeling. But if we don't get clear about what am I feeling, and to say, well, I'm frustrated, that's not clear enough. If you're the person asking questions, you'll say, tell me about that frustration, say more about that, and help the person really get in touch. not only with the emotions, but if nothing changes, what's likely to happen?
Yes.
What's at stake here? That's a big question when you say, what's at stake? If it's a year down the road and nothing has changed, what results are you going to see? How's this going to impact you? And if that were to happen, what would you feel about that? And so it's this beautiful questioning where, you know, get to the end and you just basically say, given everything we've just talked about, what do you see as the next most important step you need to take? So I came to that, Tara, because that model, because when I was invited to chair these CEO think tanks, I felt woefully unprepared. I'm an English major. You know, I started out teaching high school English, which I absolutely loved. I did end up spending 8 years as a headhunter, which was an interesting transition, and I learned a lot about business then. But I had not been a top executive. You know, I had not been in the room where all these things were happening. So, you know, in my one-to-ones with these CEOs, I'm certainly not going to give them advice. And I had 30 of them, all different industries. What do I know about any of that? Nothing at all. It was really fun learning about it, but I didn't know anything about it. So I'm not going to be advising them. And I had to come up with this model, and it changed everything. And the reason I wrote the book was because it sort of got out that the CEOs in my groups were really, really doing very well. And when they would be interviewed, they would sometimes refer to their conversations with me and their meetings with their peers, because once a month they would, you know, each group would spend a day together advising one another. So I started getting requests, come and teach me. What are you doing? How are you doing that? And so I traveled all over the world, and people said, you have to write this down. Please write this down. Write this down. I can only take so many notes. So that's why the first book, Fierce Conversations. And the fact that it became a New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestseller right out of the gate just indicated that there were a lot of people like me who wanted to have more meaningful conversations with people. I mean, I can do small talk with the best of them, but it's not my favorite way to spend time. You know, I'd rather talk about something interesting.
I'm the same way.
Something. Love is not unconditional. There are conditions. If there aren't, there should be. Figure out what your conditions are. What is the deal breaker for you? But even my own children, there are things where I can say, I love you, and boy, I do not like what you just did or what you just said. And let's talk about that. And you know, here's why I do not want that ever to happen again. And lay down the law. Don't step over this line with me. Don't. I am your mother, and I love you, and I will not tolerate X, whatever X is. And he was talking with his counselor about, you know, I want, you know, the reason I'm so thoughtful with my daughter and praise her and show her my love is because I want her to grow up and look for that in a relationship. And the counselor said, that's not what she's going to be looking for. What she's watching is how you treat her mother. And I would want everyone to ask themselves, you know, what is the conversation that my partner and I have not been able to have, that if we were able to have it, could change everything. I have always felt that one of the greatest gifts I can give my children and my grandchildren is travel, because I want them to travel the world to see that there is more than one right way to live a life. There are many gods. Choose your God carefully. The God you choose is the God you deserve. And I think that a careful conversation is almost always a failed conversation, because it simply postponed the conversation that is dying to take place. It needs to take place. It wants to take place. But we have to be so careful, because I don't want to offend anybody, or and they might not like me. It's like, oh wow, if I can't love myself, if I really don't love myself, I can't accept love from somebody else, because even if they stand in front of me and say, I love you so much, inside I'm going, I'm not worthy of that. You can't possibly, if you really knew, blah, 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 you wouldn't. I mean, we can't even let it in, much less give it back.